Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet some new friends, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something along the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. If you're enjoying the conversations and interviews here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching or listening. Also, if you're interested or know any folks that would be interested in coming on and chatting, feel free to reach me on Twitter. My handle there is IsaacR11. All right, so with that out of the way, let's go. I'm very, very excited for my guest today. And I know I usually show the coffee, but I think today, just in honor of my guest, I have a diet beverage. So today, my guest is the one, the only Scott Hanselman. Scott, do you want to say hello, introduce yourself?
Hello. Yeah, I don't drink coffee. Uh, so
I should
I'm
have.
a little shocked that your background wasn't like edited to say Diet Coke and
Oh,
open
I,
source.
I, I,
But
I definitely
missed
should.
opportunity.
Oh, definitely missed opportunity. I'll
Yeah,
be sure to
yeah,
fix that in post, as they say.
yeah. Fix that in post. Yeah, I'm Scott Hanselman. I'm a old person on the internet, and I work at Microsoft on C# and open source and the cloud. And I have a very messy desk. So if you see me looking down, it's not that I'm not deeply interested in the conversation. I am overwhelmed with the amount of crap on my desk. So maybe we have a conversation about all the crap on my desk, and we can help.
Yeah,
Isaac help Scott clean his desk would be a topic for today's
it's
show.
funny because I don't know if you have done this in the past or anybody that's tuning in, but like if I am ever on a treadmill, what I'll do is I'll put like a towel over like the treadmill screen because I don't want to know like how many calories I burned or any of that because it's just like the competitiveness of my body and the distraction of my body. Like, okay, I'm watching these numbers move it up and down. So I totally can relate. My desk is quite messy as well. Maybe we should have a giant we can all get jump on screen and just share our horrible looking desks and maybe we can give each other some advice on how to make them a bit cleaner.
Well,
But yeah,
I don't know why I became overwhelmed. As soon as you got on the call, I was just like, these USB cables are freaking me out, and there's like just way too many cables. So I'm like, I got to remove these before Isaac sees them. But of course, you can't see them because
yeah,
they're on my desk.
I hope it's not because I make you nervous. My goal is for none of my guests to ever be nervous on the show. So I mean
No,
if
I'm
it
not.
if
I'm not nervous.
okay, great.
I'm
Well,
just messy.
I think one of the things I'd love to start off with the conversation is, all of us in tech have a tech origin story, or a particular point in time where we came across tech, and or some technology or software in general, and they kind of had this affinity for it, and they kind of fell in love with it. Like, do you have a particular point in time where that came across to you, and would you love to share that story?
Well, I've shared a similar story many, many, many times. I uh, I got I got I didn't get an Apple II. I had access to an Apple II when I was in fifth grade, and Mrs. Marion Hill, my fifth grade teacher, let me use it, and then let me sneak it out of the building on Sundays. So my tech origin story was that a teacher let me borrow a computer inappropriately because why would she give it to me? And she let us basically steal it. And as long as we had it back before Sunday night, then then it was okay. So we snuck it out on Fridays and we got it back on Sunday. And so I spent entire weekends on an Apple II when others had no access. And then of course, when that got shut down by the principal, my dad sold our van, 1972 Ford Econoline, and I came home one day, the van was gone, and a Commodore 64 was there. And I was the first kid on the block to have a Commodore 64, and he was a firefighter, and my mom was a zookeeper, so it was not like we had Commodore 64 money. But
Sure.
he went to Sears, and he bought a Commodore 64 for $299, and then bought a little 13-inch TV for it, and then later got a disk drive because you needed a disk drive to make it do anything.
So here's a question. So why do you? And I imagine you've probably thought about this, or maybe even talked about it. Like, what was it? What was it about the teacher giving you the ability to do that? Was it you were always curious about it? You were always trying to figure out ways to get on it? Did you see some
I'd
affinity, or
never
like,
seen one. This
okay,
is, I'm a little older than you. I'd never seen this
no,
before. This is the first
sure,
time I've ever seen a computer in my life, right? So there are those who today have tablets in their hands at age 3, but we'd never seen a computer before until we were like 12. So a computer shows up and like this wasn't a computer per kid. This wasn't a computer in the labs. We didn't have like none of that existed.
yeah.
It was like a $2,500 computer and the school had one. So We eventually got one per classroom, one single individual computer. So then there was a corner of the classroom. So there was a, oh my God, there's something big is happening. So the sense of something big is happening was in the air. And that got us excited because we didn't know what this thing was. It was a
Yeah.
television with keyboard attached.
Yeah, I remember like I'm a little bit younger than you, but like computers were still not like in the classroom consistently. Like in elementary school, for instance, like if you got your stuff done, like you can go and sit in the back and on the Apple and play like the Caterpillar game or whatever it was, right? So like, but I definitely can
Snake?
relate. It might have been that, yeah. Like I just remember it. Like again, this is like second grade or third grade. I just remember it was very much like a Caterpillar type of game, but it was obviously some learning thing because they wouldn't be
Yeah.
it wouldn't be in there. Um,
Uh, I
but
think I
yeah,
was
it's
playing Prince of Persia.
well, or what was the other? There was another game like also, and then like when Windows came out and like some, I guess like Mavis Beacon. I don't know if you remember Mavis Beacon, like the typing tool that like came out probably like in the mid to late 90s where like taught people how to touch type. Like interesting things, right? And I think one of the things that's very, very interesting about your story that I can relate to is like you appreciated the like this is a big deal,
Oh yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
Like I like was it something where you were nervous about like for instance like this thing in your house or were you just
Oh
did you
yeah.
take it apart, put it back together? Did you do that tinkering sort of thing or was
It
it
was
like
100% nervous. It was worth because this thing's worth more than the. I mean, my dad had a truck that we would pick the thing up and we put it in the back of the truck.
yeah.
So this thing is worth more than the truck. So yeah,
Yeah.
like there was definitely I'd never seen anything that was worth $2,000 before in my life.
Yeah. And at what point in time did you figure out that you or realize that like I really like this or maybe not to be too excited like something that you actually were good at or you had an affinity for like when did you realize that?
Did I know I was good at it?
Maybe good's not the right word like this is something that you would rather play with that thing than literally do anything else almost immediately.
I don't know. I think it was more. It's all I ever knew how to do.
Sure.
Like there's two ways to look at it. There's like, oh, I'm good at this. I want to do this for the rest of my life. And then there's the, gosh, I don't know if I'm ever going to be good at anything. So actually, now that I'm older, I'm spending most of my time developing other skills because there's not a lot
Sure.
of software engineers on The Walking Dead. So I want to know when the apocalypse come that I can chop wood.
I think one of the things that people can really relate with you, obviously, in the space that you work is you have like this passion for educating folks, right? And I kind of talk, the computer literacy question, right, is very interesting, but like education around technology in general is really interesting for me. Like, I know that you've spent some time, doing, I believe you've taught at community college, right? Or that's maybe
I've taught it both.
yeah,
I taught it both at Portland Community College and Oregon Institute of Technology, which is a
yeah.
state college.
Yeah. So, what was your experience like? Obviously, you know, you've mentored folks that are in tech already. You've had conversations with folks that are interested in tech. Like, is there themes that you've taken through all these sort of conversations, or is it just, well, kids in college want to get an A or get a B or get a passing grade? People in tech
Well,
want, yeah,
it's generational. So like now we have inflation and we have, late stage capitalism. So it's like people want to eat. So people want to get jobs. So a lot of people want to get into tech to pay the rent. That's a thing that's common in modern times. During the time that I was doing it, we didn't really anyone could get a job doing anything, and you didn't think, oh, tech is lucrative. That was the last thing that we were thinking about. So the idea of like, wow, that wasn't possible. I want to explore that was a lot more common. These things that we were doing were very much like I'd never seen that before. Connecting two computers together with a telephone, that's crazy.
yeah,
So we would just be excited about that and then go running. Um, those concepts were very of the moment. The internet was starting, dial-up modems were starting. So I think our motivations were different. Right now, everyone wants to get into tech to improve their lives, which is good.
yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question though.
No, I mean, I think it's there's definitely some interesting pieces to take out of it, right? I think there is something to say about there are different kinds of people in technology, right? There's people that, like you said, want to eat, and there's other people that technology is a lifestyle of sorts, right? Like you spend time on different social media platforms that are tech focused. You want to build software or build things or work on technology or work on hardware or making
Hmm.
things in your free time, right? So there it's a hobbyist mentality too, right? And it's interesting that we spend a lot of time talking about like one of those personas, one of those type of folk. But we don't talk a lot about the person that's just trying to make sure they have food, make sure they have rent, make sure they have all these things, right? Like what is it about technology that some people just feel like they need to spend all their time doing? Is it just like any other hobby or is it something
Oh,
different?
wow. That's a that gets into like the psychology of why people do
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah.
I think there's people who well, there's just doing something because you enjoy it. But then there's also, if your life is out of control, the thing you can control is the miniatures, the woodworking, the whatever, the thing that you're doing. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, like, some people are like, wow, when I'm stressed out, I clean my desk, like I'm doing right now. Or when I'm stressed out, I go and do woodworking or whatever, you know? So, I think for a generation, uh, my generation, there was a certain amount of things are overwhelming. I'm gonna go and I can at least I can manage the soldering iron. You know what I mean? Like that, everything sucks. I'm a latchkey kid, but I can deal with this thing or I can deal with that thing.
Yeah.
I think now people go to social media because they need a third place. You know the theory of the third place?
Yeah.
Yeah. So people need home, work, and one other place, and that might be church or that might be, and then that has unfortunately become social media. And then the computers are a part of that because you need a computer to get on social media. And then video games was a part of that when I was growing up. But I think it's a control thing. People's lives are out of control, so then they want to gain control through uh, the thing that they can control, which in this case would be like the hobby or the thing that I'm working on.
Yeah. So yeah, I think one of the things that I was kind of talking about is like this sense of community, right? Like I think in social media kind of fills that void, especially, you know, we've talked about in a
Oh,
colleague.
Damien's here, by the way.
Oh yay! Hi Damien.
So
Um,
he's the only other person here, so we don't feel alone.
Perfect. Perfect. I had a colleague, they were using like the BC, DC, AC, like before COVID, during COVID, after COVID is like precursors for different things, right? And,
Mm,
I think especially in like the time AC after COVID, or well, COVID is still ongoing, but after the very, very dangerous part of
yeah.
COVID in the United States, um, we've kind of lost a lot of that community, right? Like we can't
Yeah, the
go,
third place
yeah,
is not physical, is what you're saying.
yeah, exactly, right? So there's more and more folks that are looking for this community somewhere else, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
I'd love to get your thoughts is like how do we is this the new normal? Is this a stepping stone to eventually going back to normal? Are we ever going to be at a place like 2019 where we're all running around doing crazy things, hopping on planes all the time? Like, you know,
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So
yep,
first, we never should have been jumping on planes. It's
yes,
irresponsible to burn that much carbon just to haul your 100-pound ass across the country. So I am being much more responsible about where I'm going. I'm not going to fly for 100 people. And if I do go somewhere, I'm going to do 9 or 10 things when I get there. So, for example, we have a fella in Europe right now. He ordinarily would have gone over there, done a conference, and come back. But now he's going to, use a train and he's going to drive around to 4 different countries and do 15 user groups. And he's going to, while he's there, he's going to make as much use of the carbon that he burned as possible. So, oh, Chris Perillo's here. Hey, Chris Perillo. Oh, yeah. I
yeah.
haven't talked to Chris in, I haven't talked to Chris in a while.
I think what happened is someone probably retweeted that you're live on stream right now,
Yeah,
and people probably
that was me.
are
I'm
hopping
sorry.
on. No, I
That
mean
was
that's
me.
great. That's great. I mean everybody welcome. Don't just watch Scott though. Like I do these all the time. So like stick around for the conversations, no matter who they are, not just Scott. Uh,
Damien's pointing out that we should roll out that as a policy. So it has always been the policy of my team that you don't get to do one thing. And you and
Yeah.
I, when we used to go to conferences together, we were very much of that focus. It's not cool to just roll in, talk to 30 people, and then hang out for the week. You
Yeah.
gotta hit the streets.
Yeah. Well, I think, especially like in our area, right? Like in .NET, like we're privileged in the fact that there are .NET developers everywhere. And if you go to a major metropolitan area or even just a larger area where there's a swath of developers enough to be a conference, there's probably a meetup that's assigned there. There's a user group that's there. You have the opportunity to go and speak to those folks as well. I'm a big advocate for, like, you want to have some sort of sprawl of interaction, right? Because if you go and speak at a conference of like 1,500 people,
Hmm.
you only get to talk to people that have the privilege of being at that conference because their employer paid for it. You should do your part to be able to engage with folks that might not have that privilege. So, speaking in a meetup, trying to find time for coffee with folks. Obviously, different levels of access required, right? But I think that there's something really really interesting about the fact that you can't just go do an hour long session to 100 people and then hang out for a week. Like, and if anybody's employer is okay with that, like, there's probably a bit of, okay, so what is the real return on investment for that time, right? Because people in tech traveling all over the planet, it's not very cheap, right?
It's irresponsible, I think, is even the larger point that we're
Yeah,
making. It's just a bad idea.
yeah. I it, but I know you well enough to know that you feed off of that energy, right?
You mean
Like,
talking to humans?
yes, yes. I think
Yeah, I mean, I like humans.
if anybody's met you, you know that you have this amazing ability to have conversations with literally anybody, right? Like, you have your own podcast, you love having conversation with folks, right? So is is the current implementation of the way that you have conversation with the folks, aka in your office 100% of the time, never leaving, family bringing you sandwiches, like, has that made life a bit easier for you, or do you still kind of feel that need for face-to-face human interaction?
I always did that though. Like I don't remember that I've been working remotely
Yeah.
for 15 years, so like nothing really changed other than I couldn't go down the street and sit at McDonald's and use their Wi-Fi. So it was, like the pandemic did not change my lifestyle that much, other than the traveling,
Yeah, and
traveling less.
well, that's kind of my point, right? Like, you mentioned that you don't travel as much anymore because of a lot of reasons, right?
Hmm.
Have you been able, does the virtual experiences that we have now to engage with other developers all over the world, like, is that as fulfilling as going and speaking to a room of 3,000 people or whatever?
No, it's differently fulfilling. Well,
Yeah.
but I think the nice thing is that it's allowed us to all get our gear together. I mean, everyone has gotten their video gear except you.
Yeah, except
Uh,
me, except me,
you saw
except
that
me.
coming. I
I'm
knew that you
so
knew that was
orange.
coming.
I'm so
I don't know
orange.
what is going on with
Yeah,
your
I'm
OBS,
I
dude.
I'm gonna fix it in, like, just talk for 2 seconds and I'll fix it.
I was on a call yesterday with the Lowlands Dutch user group in the Netherlands, and it was Sukje and Henk Bolman, and man, they set up their whole thing. It was so well organized. It was like so posh for a user group, and it was so well done. They projected me up on a back wall, and they had a nice split screen. They composited the whole thing with OBS. The user group, like OBS and stuff, has really made the user group experience really really nice.
But we're
The
good
point
now.
is though
We're good
that the
now.
pandemic really really improved user groups, and it was extremely satisfying. And I did not need to fly to Holland in
Yep.
order to do that. And it was like 50 or 60 people, but it also lets you like reach a lot more. I did a YouTube yesterday, and let me see here, 5,300 views and a lot of positive comments. Like I don't think I would have done that pre-COVID, so that's a beneficial thing. But still, but you still get benefits from seeing people in person. So I went and did Power Platform conference, and there was 5,000 people there. Very satisfying, and felt really positive, and felt like this was a useful piece of my time. So I just feel like the hybrid event is the move right now. An event that is truly well organized and respects that people are in the room and respects that more people are at home in their jammies with their phones.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think there is some level of hybrid, or not hybrid, but virtual fatigue, right?
Mhm.
Where,
Oh yeah.
especially in, in the before COVID times, like if you wanted to go to a tech event and you had the luxury that your employer would send you, you could go and network and talk with product group or talk to sponsors and check out sessions, and you didn't have to have your laptop open looking at Slack, looking at Teams,
Hmm.
checking email constantly, right? Now, not very many people get the luxury of being able to close their laptop as well
Hmm.
as attend these virtual sessions. So I think one thing that's really, really interesting about all of this is that, there needs to be some form of engagement with the audience that's different for a lot of folks, right? Like, there's one of the things that is very, very interesting to me, like different ways that you can entertain and educate people using some of these virtual events, right? Like, you're a huge proponent of this. You and I have talked about this many, many times. Like, the whole idea of just being on a, you know, being on like a team stage or a Zoom stage or whatever, sharing slides, showing pre-recorded demo, showing slides, pre-recorded demo. It's really, really hard for some folks to be able to pay attention, right? So you have to be engaging in some way. See, and this is one of the things that is very, very fun. Like you mentioned this, like this, your setup, right? Like a friend of ours, Golnaz, she made this comment a couple of years ago, right? Like all of these like suburban dads like had to become like Zoom or Teams experts, right? So like the amount of money that's been pumped into all these different companies that have built hardware to be able to make Scott Hanselman look good on camera, like they've
Oh,
it's
it's obnoxious. Like,
yeah.
say, suburban dads and moms,
Yep.
anyone's a Twitch streamer now, and it's obnoxious. So like, why not?
One of the things I'd love to kind of like is you realize pretty early on that you like technology. You had an opportunity, a teacher gave you a somewhat shady way to access technology, right?
The
And
keyword being access,
access, yes.
right? Like
Uh,
the point there is so important is that someone gave me access to something that others didn't have, and that's why access for new people in tech is so important.
yeah. And do you feel like that's kind of been something that you've carried around and that's why you're interested in teaching or,
Yep.
enabling like the next level is to
It
because
is
you
the
had an opportunity?
it is
Yeah.
the only thing that matters. I mean, that's really, if you want to get deep for a second, sending
Please.
sending the ladder back down is the only thing that matters,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean the like we use the cliche phrase like we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Like
Mhm.
at some point in time, hopefully, we're a giant for somebody and they're standing on our shoulders, right?
Yep.
Like and I think one of the things that's very, very important is that that can mean all sorts of different things. Like some people aren't going to feel comfortable going in like teaching at a community college or a technical institute. Other people might feel that there's value in providing some technology or some like trying to build community in the existing social channels, right? Like, and there's a huge swath of things that you can do in the middle to give back, right?
Mhm.
Like, for people that might want to give back, but they don't know where to start, like, do you have any recommendations or thoughts on how do people get started giving back?
Yeah, like go outside, local user group, charter school,
But how do we do
middle
that
school. You
in
just go, you just
in yeah
call people. Like I'm just so shocked that people are sitting around wondering what it is that they can do to give back. Like talk to your local church or religious organization. Go teach old people how to set up their iPads. Like literally do anything. You know how to do stuff. Go teach other people how to do stuff. There's a senior community center down the street from my house. Go down there, teach the old people how to set up their iPads, set up their phones, make sure that people have two-factor auth, teach Nana and Papa how to do two-factor auth. You know, all these kind of things. There you go. Damien said he taught Microsoft Publisher 1.0. I don't know why you want to teach that in 2022, but good job teaching that. I mean, but like talk to people, make it more accessible. Someone out there has an idea for an app, help them make that happen. If you are looking to fill up your portfolio, go and make a website for your kids' little league,
yeah
right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that too that like at least for me when I first started to have like this like people recognize, oh, this person is good with computers, so I'm going to turn that person to the help desk, right? Like you have to be okay
Hmm?
with the feeling of feeling needed and not feel like you're being used or exploited, right? Like think of
Exploit. You
it.
can't. No, you can't exploit. Like you need to be more generous. Not you. One needs to be
Sure,
more generous. Help Nan and Papa set up their printer. It is a
sure,
gift. The time with them is a gift. And if they need their
yes,
printer set up, you drive over there and you set up their printer and you do it patiently. So yeah,
yeah.
there was a very nice comment from a gentleman or a person in the chat here that said that they had emailed me out of the blue a few times and I had answered their nonsense. That is a
Well, I
gift that
mean,
we give
yeah,
people. You know what I mean? So yeah, I want to encourage everyone who's listening that that's how you do it. Do that forever until you're dead. Give the
yeah.
gift of your knowledge.
Yeah, I think there is this I don't know if it's a cliche or what, but it's like we die with the knowledge that we have, right? Like unless we pass it on to other people. And like you see this in if you study anthropology, like that's like literally what anthropology is, like the being able to pass down the things that you know to the next generation and then eventually it just becomes part of society, right?
Yeah.
And eventually at some point in 100,000 years it like the work that our generation has done hasn't isn't going to probably be as known, but it's building blocks to build a tower,
Yep.
right? And I think one of the things that's interesting about specifically what you do is that you take this large effort in making it fun, right? Like you could easily just be available, fix printers, speak, do these things, but you do it with this little bit of, I guess you could say, flair. Like, where do you think that comes from? Like, I know you have a little bit of background in things like improv and things like that. Is it just because you kind of have this needness, or not needness isn't a word, but this want to entertain people, and you just found a healthy conduit for these two interests of yours, technology and entertainment?
No, everyone's different, and I think that if you're doing something and you're not having fun, then why are you doing it? And I was in a meeting a couple of days ago, and we were talking to some customer, and it was just such a dry meeting, and it's just like, what a lifeless corporate awful meeting that this is. So I feel sad when people are that's what they have. Like that's why have we beaten the fun out of everything? I think I was a couple of years ago. I was using poo as a variable because you have like foo and bar,
Yeah.
and I thought that was stupid. So I just started using poo, and someone emailed my boss and was like, Scott is persisting to be unprofessional in meetings and using poo as a variable. So then I just started using the poo emoji just to make the point that like, come on, man, just like life is not that deep. You don't have to be a dick all the time.
Yeah.
You can just like so I to your point about like why do I have a little bit of zhuzh, you
Yeah.
know? How can you not? Like your green screen broke, so I brought mine out and put a Chipotle sign up. Why? Because it was
Be-
fun, and why the hell
yes.
not? You know what I mean? Like we're just goofing around, right?
Yeah.
Damien says bring the spice. So yeah, they're just people are just goofing around. I just don't understand why everyone makes life so depressing, especially corporate life.
Yeah, but I think that you're oversimplifying it a little bit. Like let's it's
Oversimplifying is what I do
yeah.
best.
I think goodness gracious. So there are people out there that take themselves too seriously. I think that's a fair thing to say. However, I refuse to let you concede that like, oh, everybody should just be like Scott Hanselman,
No,
right?
everyone should be the best version of themselves.
Sure. And do you think the best version of Scott Hanselman is the person that spent 15 seconds during a live interview setting up and tearing down a green screen?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that me trolling you with a green screen was the highlight of this event, frankly,
Probably.
and
Probably.
was 100% worth the time.
That's good. We'll be sure like I'll look at the engagement and that 45 seconds is going to be the most viewed part. And maybe somebody will clip it and turn it into a meme.
Yeah, but I'm not saying be me.
Yeah.
I'm saying be you. But I'm saying
Yeah.
that if like Do you remember that commercial back in the 80s when the guy like wakes up at 5 in the morning and he goes, "Time to make the donuts."
Yep.
Like the Dunkin' Donuts guy. He
Yeah.
was very sad. I'm just saying, try to find a thing that you can do that makes you excited to wake up and, be happy if you can be. Here you go. Great. People are agreeing with me in the chat, which is really all that matters, Isaac.
You're the
Coding
guest. It's
Adventure
all that
says
matters.
they don't like dry corporate communications. Yeah, throw an emoji in there.
It's quite funny because you're feeling like it seems to be like I feel like you're kind of attacking me or telling me to, hey, you should do it like this. Scott, you and I are very, very similar in this regard, right? Like
I'm
I think
attacking
that
you? No, my friend.
no. Attacking is not the right word. You are telling me in a way that I don't know these sort of things. I think one of the things that's very, very interesting is the fact that you do these things very without a lot of effort, right? And that's one of the things and this is I'm not trying to over compliment you, but I'm trying to say that you have this ability, whether good, bad, or indifferent. I know you don't like people saying nice things about you. Um, that you have this ability to make things accessible for folks in an
Oh,
entertaining
thank you.
way while teaching, right?
That's very kind.
And I think one of the things that my audience would probably love to hear is if you have some sort of structure to it or you're just gifted, right? Because I think that there are things that you could teach people in this space. And I'm curious because, look, I one day strive to be Scott Hanselman. So I'm going to change my name to Scott Hanselman. Um, but I think I would love to hear, like, is it calculated? Do you write things down? Do you write ideas down?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Do you think
Everything.
about things like how can I take this, like, Coding Adventure said, boring corporate communication. How do I make it interesting?
Okay.
How can I turn it into my voice? How can I do these
Gotcha.
things? Like, what are some of the processes that you use to be able to accomplish these things?
Yeah, yeah. So the number one thing, if you want to know the Hanselman secret, and like here's you heard it here first kind of thing,
Sure.
it is empathy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you apply it to Coding Adventures corporate communications, would I want to receive this email? Right? If someone emails you randomly and they want to be on your show, right? And to like email Isaac and say, "Hey, I want to be on your show." What's an email you would like to receive? If it's
Yep.
dry and boring and lame, you click unsubscribe, you click mark as spam, and you move on, right?
Yep.
If it's goofy, too wacky, then you're going to be like, "Yeah, you're trying too hard. You're squeezing the joke," and then you're going to click move to spam. So you got to walk a razor's edge of like, what's the right amount of goofiness? Because if it goes to be Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy level of goof, then
Yeah.
like it's like, hey, we're trying to work here, right?
Yeah.
But if it's boring and dry and makes you scroll, then it's like, that was not fun. So you always have to ask yourself, what does the audience want from
Yeah.
us right now? And what the audience needed from me right now was a green screen.
An email giving me $1 million is what somebody said in chat. That's what they actually want. I mean, I would probably want a more than $1 million, but that's just
Even
me
if a
being greedy.
legitimate email showed up today, no one would believe it. That's the
Sure.
problem.
This is very true.
That's the problem.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, even like when you see like the what was it, the tax rebates or whatever that came out last year, it's like, no, this is like I
Yeah.
don't trust this at all.
Nobody believes
Um,
it.
like and I think one thing that's very, very interesting about you specifically, kind of moving away from like your goals to have more empathy, your goals to give back, pass the ladder down, as you say, is like, you know, taking the work of others and trying to amplify it because that's really, really important too. And that's like part of the show is talking about open source, right? So what is
Mhm.
it about open source that you love so much that you feel connected to?
Is it about open source that I feel connected to? I like that. I like that I didn't have to pay. I think that it's like, if you ever done a barn raising,
Yep.
right? Everyone in the audience is like, "What's a barn raising?" Open source is like a barn raising, right? And then you get to all stand back and say, "Look at that barn that we just raised up. That's
Yep.
pretty cool." That
Yeah.
that's like that's open source. Like that's the whole point. Like if you go like work for Habitat for Humanity and you go and build a house in a couple of months on a weekend, and a bunch of people who kind of like have some background, but no one's actually a contractor,
Yep.
and then maybe one of the people knows what they're doing, right? Those things are good examples of what open source is. It's like, hey, we did that and we have no business doing that and we're not even good at it and we did it anyway.
Yeah.
That's cool.
In your mind, are these kind of these two different topics that we've talked about today, are they connected? Like, are they almost the same thing, right? Like this building empathy for the next generation or just for others around you. And then on the open source side, talking about the work of others, thinking about others when you're building things, working together to solve a singular goal. Like, are these the same thing just with different lenses on?
That's the whole point, right? Like again, we come back to setting the ladder back down and helping people out. It takes a village. It's kind of like the opposite of like extreme libertarianism, where it's like, hey, I did it, and you should be able to do it. Lift yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's literally village. It takes a village.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone should work on these things together. So if I have something and I can help you, and I will help you, and then we will both be better.
Yeah, I think that there's something very interesting about the doing better part because I think one thing that's great about tech is that we're always trying to do better. In the now time, it seems like things are just chaotic, right? But if you look at tech now versus tech 5 years ago versus 10 years ago versus whatever, like tech has definitely moved in this more accessible, more inclusive, more diverse way, right?
Mhm.
Like do you think that there's any particular reason for that or that it's moving along at the same clip that society is?
I think people don't give chaos enough credit for bringing order. Coding Adventures points out the excellent book on Linux and open source, The Cathedral and the Bazaar, which juxtaposes the extreme organization of building a cathedral or the awesome wackiness of a souk or a bazaar or a flea market. And sometimes amazing things come out of both. So there's a need for both. So
Yeah.
extreme planning and being organized has some value, but it also stifles creativity. And sometimes bazaars are dumpster fires, and sometimes they're amazing, and you find cool stuff at Goodwill.
Yeah, and that's it's funny that there's a few singular places though where everybody kind of like I guess the community gathers, right? Like obviously different social media platforms, right? Like how can we figure out effective ways to leave our echo chamber, right? Because I think everybody in social media they formed an echo chamber to an extent, right? How do we leave our echo chamber, but at the same time, don't immediately get burnt out with differing opinions as yours? Because I think that's one of the things too that's really important is, you only grow if you're having conversations or learning from people that you wouldn't typically learn from,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like,
Well, that's diversity in any system, right? You have to
yeah,
have a lot of different people, a lot of different perspectives. Otherwise, it's just the same four people who went to middle school together, hanging out, trying to build a new thing. That's pretty
yeah,
challenging to do that.
yeah. So how do we do it though? Like how and I know I'm not looking for the definitive answer, but I think as somebody who has spent a long time in their career getting to the point where you have a little bit of influence, you have a little bit of I guess muscle memory as it pertains to things that have worked or you've seen things that have worked for you, right? Like what are some things that you think of that we can take away as a part of this conversation to do better and continually to do better?
I think, again, what is empathy? It is stepping outside
Yeah.
of your own beliefs and personalities and putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And if you can listen to, if you can stop thinking about what it matters to you and how it matters to someone else, that's that's the trick.
So
That seems
empathy is the
empathy.
thing, right? Yeah.
Everyone's forgotten it, right? What would Mister Rogers do?
Yeah. Is it be is it because and this is probably a bit too inside baseball or inside the head of Scott Hanselman, but is it because you were given that gift so early on? Or is it something that you learned from your parents, you learned from people around you in the community when you were growing up? Like what do you think kind of caused like because like you said, not a lot of people have like a realistic level of empathy. Like where do you think your empathy comes from?
Um, Probably my dad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he was a single dad, not a single dad. His mom, my grandma was a single mom
He
in
was
like
a
the
he was a
in
parent. He was a child of a
single
single
parent. He
parent.
was a
Yeah.
child of a single parent in like the 50s, which is not a time when being a single parent is a good thing. And by a good thing, I mean like it was not respected by the community. So like, oh, this is a single mom over here, like something's wrong. And my grandfather had died, but having him be raised by a single mom and having him not have a father figure raised him in a kind of a very mothering, empathetic, kind of
Yeah.
gentle way. So I think the empathy was baked in.
Hey, folks. We had to cut the conversation with Scott a little bit short because of the technical difficulties. But I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Hope you enjoyed the episode. And I hope you tune into new episodes of Coffee and Open Source. And we'll see you then. Take care.